I should have known something was wrong when I saw the price of the rental. It was a renovated farmhouse deep in the Missouri Ozarks, miles away from the nearest cell tower. The listing said it was a digital detox paradise. My cousin, Ben, and I just saw it as a cheap place to spend the month before our college semester started. We wanted to hike, fish, and forget about exams. The owner, a nervous guy named Mr. Krebs, gave us the keys without making eye contact. He had one specific rule that stuck in my head. "Keep the floodlights on at night," he said, handing me the heavy iron key ring. "And never ever open the storm cellar in the backyard." We laughed about it as we drove up the winding dirt road. The trees here were thick, creating a canopy that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. It felt like we were driving into a tunnel made of leaves and branches. When we finally pulled up to the house, it looked normal enough. It was white with a wraparound porch, but the windows had heavy wooden shutters, which seemed weird for a vacation home. We unpacked the car, blasting music and ignoring the heavy silence of the woods. If I had known what was watching us from the tree line that very first afternoon, I would have turned the car around and never looked back. We were already being hunted, and we didn't even know it. The first night was quiet, too quiet. Usually when you stay in the country, you hear crickets, frogs, or owls. But the woods surrounding the farmhouse were dead silent. It felt like the forest was holding its breath. Ben and I made burgers on the grill and sat on the porch. The floodlights Mr. Krebs mentioned were industrial grade, lighting up the yard like a football stadium. It felt excessive, but I flipped the switch anyway. As the bright LEDs hummed to life, I saw something near the edge of the light. It was just a flash of movement, something tall and dark slipping behind a massive oak tree. "Did you see that?" I asked, squinting into the darkness beyond the lights. Ben laughed, sipping his soda. "Probably just a deer, Sam. You're too jumpy." I tried to brush it off, but the shape I saw didn't move like a deer. It didn't move like a bear either. It had moved with a strange, jerky speed, almost like a glitch in a video game. Later that night, I woke up to a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a long, low scratch against the side of the house. It wasn't a branch scraping in the wind. It sounded like metal dragging across the siding. Scrape, pause, scrape. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing the sound was coming from directly under my window. Something was testing the walls. The next morning, the sun didn't make me feel any safer. I went outside to investigate the noise from the night before. The grass under my window was trampled flat, but it wasn't just messy, it was deliberate. I found a footprint pressed deep into the mud near the foundation. I froze. I've been hunting with my dad since I was a kid. I know what a bear track looks like. I know what a wolf track looks like. This was neither. It looked like a canine print, with pads and claw marks, but it was massive. It had to be at least 7 inches long. And the weirdest part? There were no other prints leading up to it or away from it. It's like the thing had dropped out of the sky. I called Ben over. He stared at it, his face losing some of its color. "Maybe it's a prank," he said, but his voice shook. "Maybe some locals are messing with the city kids." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But then I looked at the siding of the house. About 7 feet up the wall, way higher than a wolf could reach, there were 3 deep gouges. They had ripped through the paint and into the wood. Whatever made those marks was standing on 2 legs, and it was strong enough to carve through timber like it was butter. The feeling of being watched returned, heavier this time. I scanned the tree line, and for a split second, I saw amber eyes reflecting the sunlight before they vanished. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. Despite Mr. Krebs' warning, or maybe because of it, my mind kept drifting to the storm cellar in the backyard. It was a heavy steel double door, padlocked and covered in rust. Why would a rental owner be so terrified of a storage space? By noon, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. The air felt thick and electric, like a thunderstorm was coming, even though the sky was clear. Ben was trying to fix the Wi-Fi router, which had mysteriously died, leaving us completely cut off. "The line is cut," Ben said, coming back from the side of the house. "It looks like someone sliced the cable." That was the moment the fear turned into panic. An animal doesn't slice a cable, a person does. We debated leaving right then. We should have, but the car keys were missing. I had left them on the kitchen counter, I was sure of it. Now they were gone. We tore the living room apart looking for them. "Check the cellar," Ben joked nervously, but I wasn't laughing. We were stranded. No internet, no cell service, no car, and something outside knew exactly what it was doing. I went to the back window to check the yard again. The storm cellar doors were no longer padlocked. The rusty lock had been snapped off and was lying in the grass. One of the steel doors was cracked open just an inch, revealing pitch-black darkness underneath. Sunset came too fast. We spent the afternoon barricading the doors with chairs and tables. It felt ridiculous, like we were overreacting, but the gouges on the wall outside were real. As the light faded, turning the sky a bruised purple, I went to turn on the floodlights. I flipped the switch. Nothing happened. The yard stayed dark. "The bulbs must be blown," Ben whispered, holding a kitchen knife he had grabbed from the drawer. We were standing in the living room, peering through the slats of the shutters. The darkness outside was absolute. Then the motion sensor light on the garage flickered on. It was a weak yellow light, but it was enough to reveal the horror standing in the driveway. It was the size of a grizzly bear, but it wasn't on all fours. It was standing on its hind legs, towering over the roof of our sedan. It was covered in matted, dark fur that seemed to absorb the light. Its shoulders were incredibly broad, tapering down to a narrow waist. It looked like a bodybuilder wearing a wolf suit, but the anatomy was all wrong. The legs were dog-like, bent backward at the knee, yet it balanced perfectly. It turned its head slowly towards the house. It had a long snout, rows of jagged teeth, and those same amber eyes I had seen in the woods. It wasn't just an animal. It was a monster. I watched in paralyzed terror as it raised a hand with fingers, not a paw, and pointed directly at the window where I was standing. It knew we were watching. We backed away from the window, hearts hammering against our ribs like trapped birds. "What is that?" Ben hissed, his voice trembling so bad he could barely speak. "Dogman," I whispered. I had read the stories on forums, the urban legends about upright canines in the deep woods, but I never believed them. They were supposed to be internet spooky stories, not biological realities standing in our driveway. We retreated to the center of the living room, away from the walls. That's when the psychological torture began. From the front porch, a voice called out, "Sam! Ben! Open up! It's the police! We had a report of a disturbance." The relief that washed over me was instant. I almost ran to the door, but Ben grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "Look at the window," he mouthed. I looked. There were no flashing blue and red lights outside, no sound of a siren or a radio, just the dark. And the voice, it sounded flat. It sounded like a recording being played back. "Sam, open the door." Then it glitched. "Sam, open the door." It repeated the phrase like a broken record. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a cop. That was the thing outside. It was mimicking human speech to trick us into opening the only barrier keeping us alive. It was intelligent, and it was playing with us. The creature stopped speaking after we refused to open the door. The silence returned, heavy and oppressive. We knew we needed a weapon, something better than a kitchen knife. I remembered the storm cellar. Mr. Krebs had been terrified of it. Maybe there was something down there he was hiding, or something we could use. The cellar was outside, which was impossible, but there was a trapdoor in the pantry that led down to the same basement level. It was a risk, but staying defenseless in the living room felt like a death sentence. "I'm going down," I told Ben. "Keep watching the windows." I pulled the rug back in the pantry and lifted the heavy wooden trapdoor. The smell of mildew and old earth hit me instantly. I clicked on my flashlight and descended the creaky wooden stairs. The basement was cold, the walls made of rough stone. In the corner, I saw what Mr. Krebs was hiding. It wasn't a dead body or drugs. It was a survivalist setup. Canned food, water barrels, and a metal gun safe. But the safe was locked. On a dusty workbench nearby, I found a leather-bound journal.
I grabbed it, hoping for a code or a key. As I turned to leave, I heard a heavy thud from the storm cellar doors outside. The creature was standing right on top of the external entrance. It could smell me down there. I scrambled back up the stairs and slammed the trapdoor shut, dragging a heavy sack of flour over it. Back in the living room, Ben was pacing, his eyes wild. "It's circling the house," he whispered. "I can hear its claws on the gravel." I opened the journal I had found. The handwriting was frantic, scrawled in black ink. The first entry was dated 20 years ago. "They are not wolves. They are older. They were here before the settlers. They own these woods." I flipped through the pages. The author, presumably a previous owner, described the same things we were experiencing. The silence of the woods, the mimicry, the sabotage. I found a page titled "The Siege." It read, "They don't attack all at once. They like to create fear. Fear makes the meat taste better. They will try to separate you. Do not separate. Do not look into their eyes. Light is your only weapon, but they are learning to break the bulbs." At the bottom of the page, a code was scribbled, 4821. It had to be for the gun safe downstairs. "I have to go back down," I told Ben. He looked at me like I was crazy. "It's right on top of the cellar doors, Sam." "We need that safe," I insisted. "There might be a gun." Before I could move toward the pantry, the house plunged into total darkness. The creature had cut the main power line. The hum of the refrigerator died. The digital clock on the oven went black. We were blind. "Flashlights!" I yelled. We fumbled for our phones and the one heavy-duty flashlight I had brought. The beam cut through the dusty air, casting long, dancing shadows that looked like claws reaching for us. Being in the dark changed everything. The house, which felt like a fortress a minute ago, now felt like a cage. Then came the sound of glass breaking. It came from the kitchen. We froze. "It's inside," Ben whispered. We backed into the hallway, aiming the flashlight at the kitchen doorway. A can of beans rolled out of the kitchen and bumped against the wall. Then a low, guttural growl vibrated through the floorboards. It sounded like a massive engine idling. We didn't wait to see it. We ran into the nearest bedroom and slammed the door, locking it. It was a flimsy wooden door. It wouldn't hold a monster that could rip through siding. We pushed a heavy dresser against it, listening to the heavy, wet footsteps approaching slowly down the hall. Thump, drag, thump. We huddled in the corner of the bedroom, the dresser our only shield. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I could hear deep, wet breathing, like the thing had fluid in its lungs. It sniffed the bottom of the door, a long, loud inhalation that lasted for seconds. Then the doorknob turned. The lock clicked, straining against the wood. It knew how to use a doorknob. That realization was more terrifying than its size. It wasn't just a beast, it had problem-solving skills. The door creaked, pushing against the dresser. We pressed our backs against the furniture, digging our heels into the carpet. "Let me in, Sam," the voice said. But this time, it wasn't the fake cop. It was Ben's voice. I looked at Ben, who was sitting right next to me, his mouth clamped shut in terror. The thing outside was using Ben's voice to talk to me. "I'm hurt, Sam. Open the door." It was a perfect copy, right down to the tremor of fear. "Don't listen to it," Ben whispered, tears streaming down his face. The creature slammed a fist against the door, cracking the wood panel. Bang! "Open it!" It roared, the voice shifting from Ben's into a distorted, demonic baritone. It was toying with us, enjoying the panic before the kill. The door hinge began to buckle. We couldn't stay there. "The window," I whispered. "We have to go out the window and get to the car." I knew the keys were gone, but maybe I could hide in it, or maybe I had a spare in my bag in the trunk. It was a desperate plan, but staying in the room meant death. I slid the window up as quietly as I could. The screen was already torn. Had it been torn before? I didn't have time to think. I boosted Ben up. He scrambled through the opening and dropped onto the soft grass outside. I swung my leg over the sill. Behind me, the bedroom door splintered. A massive, hairy arm shot through the hole, blindly grasping for us. I tumbled out of the window just as the dresser went flying across the room. I hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. We were outside now, in the open, with no walls to protect us. The air was freezing. "Run to the car," I hissed. We sprinted toward the driveway, gravel crunching under our sneakers. The woods around us felt alive with eyes. We reached the sedan and I tried the handle. Locked, of course. "Break the window," Ben yelled. I looked for a rock. I found a loose brick near the garden bed and smashed it against the driver's side window. The glass shattered and the alarm started blaring. Honk, 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 honk. The noise was deafening in the silent woods. "Get in!" I screamed. We dove into the car, glass shards digging into our skin. I sat in the driver's seat, heart racing. The alarm was still going. It was a beacon calling every predator for miles. And then I saw them. Not just one, 3 of them. They emerged from the tree line like shadows detaching from the darkness. 3 dogmen. One was the massive alpha we had seen earlier. The other 2 were smaller but just as terrifying, moving on all 4s before rearing up. The alarm suddenly cut out. The alpha had ripped the hood of the car open and tore out the battery with a single swipe. The silence crashed back down on us. We were trapped in a glass and metal box, surrounded by a pack of monsters. The alpha stepped up to my window, lowering its face to the hole I had just made. Its breath smelled like rotting meat and sulfur. The alpha didn't attack immediately. It stared at me. Its eyes were intelligent, ancient, and cruel. It chuffed, a sound that sounded like a laugh. It tapped a long black claw across the steering wheel. It was savoring this. It knew we had nowhere to go. The other 2 circled the car, rocking it violently from side to side. Ben was sobbing in the passenger seat, curled into a ball. "Think, Sam, think," I told myself. The journal, the code, the gun safe. The basement was our only hope. The trapdoor in the pantry was inside the house, but there was the external storm cellar door. "Ben," I whispered, "we have to make a run for the storm cellar." "Are you crazy?" he snapped. "They'll catch us in 2 seconds. They're playing with us here. Whatever's in that safe is the only thing that might hurt them." I watched the alpha. It moved toward the rear of the car. The other 2 were on the passenger side. The path to the cellar, about 20 yards away, was momentarily clear. "On 3, I said. "We run." I gripped the door handle. 1, 2, 3. I threw the door open and sprinted. The burst of speed took the creatures by surprise. I heard a roar of outrage behind us, followed by the heavy pounding of paws on the earth. I didn't look back. I focused on the rusty cellar doors. They were slightly ajar from when the creature had investigated them earlier. I reached them first, grabbing the heavy iron handle and heaving the door open. Ben dived into the hole, tumbling down the concrete steps. I jumped in after him. A claw swiped at my ankle, catching the heel of my shoe and ripping it off. I screamed, but kicked out, my sock foot connecting with a hairy snout. I fell into the darkness, grabbing the handle of the door from the inside and slamming it shut. I threw the deadbolt just as a massive weight slammed into the metal from above. The doors groaned, dust raining down on us. Bang! Bang! They were pounding on the steel, but it held. We were in the basement. We were alive.
We were in pitch blackness again. "Flashlight!" I gasped. Ben turned his phone light on. He had somehow held on to it. The battery was at 4%. We had minutes. I scrambled over to the gun safe in the corner. "What was the code?" Ben asked, panic rising in his voice as the pounding above continued. 4821, I recited, praying the journal was right. My fingers trembled as I punched the numbers into the keypad. Beep, 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 beep. A green light flashed. Click. The handle spun. I swung the heavy door open. Inside, there was a single shotgun, a Mossberg 500, and a box of slugs. There were also flares. "Load it!" Ben yelled. I grabbed the gun. It felt heavy and cold. I had shot clays before with my uncle, but never anything living. My hands shook as I shoved the shells into the tube. 1, 2, 3, 4. Above us, the metal doors began to bend inward. A sliver of moonlight cut through the gap. They were breaking in. The screech of tearing metal filled the small space. One of the dogmen had hooked its claws under the gap in the doors and was peeling the steel back like a sardine can. I saw its snout push through the opening, snapping and snarling. I raised the shotgun. "Get back!" I yelled. The creature didn't listen. It pushed harder, widening the hole.
I aimed for the nose and pulled the trigger. The boom was deafening in the confined space. The recoil bruised my shoulder. The slug hit the creature square in the snout. It yelped, a high-pitched, dog-like sound of pain, and ripped its head back. Black blood sprayed onto the stairs, but it didn't die. I heard it thrashing outside, roaring in anger. The other two creatures took its place, tearing at the doors with renewed fury. They weren't playing anymore. They were enraged. "The pantry!" Ben shouted. "Go up through the house!" We couldn't stay in the cellar. It was a dead end, and the outer doors were failing. We ran to the wooden stairs leading up to the pantry trap door. I pushed it open, and we emerged back into the kitchen. The house was trashed. Furniture was overturned, curtains shredded. The moonlight streaming in showed the devastation. We needed a defensible position. "The attic," I said. "It has a narrow staircase. We can hold them off." We ran to the hallway, but stopped dead. Standing at the end of the hall, blocking the way to the attic stairs, was the Alpha. It was inside. It must have climbed back through the window we escaped from. It stood tall, its chest heaving, drool dripping from its jaws. It looked at the shotgun in my hands, then at me. It didn't look afraid. It looked like it was calculating the distance. It crouched, muscles bunching under its fur, ready to spring. I pumped the shotgun, chambering another round. The sound echoed in the hallway. The Alpha hesitated. It knew what the gun was now. It had seen what it did to the other pack member. "Back off!" I screamed. The creature growled, a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. It took a step forward. I fired. The shot went wide, hitting the door frame next to its head. Wood splinters exploded outward. The Alpha flinched, but didn't run. It lunged. I pumped and fired again, blindly this time. The slug caught it in the shoulder. The impact spun the massive beast around, slamming it into the wall. It howled, a sound of pure rage, and scrambled backward into the shadows of the living room. "Run!" I yelled. We bolted past the spot where it had been, sprinting for the attic stairs. I could hear it scrambling on the hardwood floor, claws slipping as it tried to regain its footing to chase us. We scrambled up the narrow stairs and slammed the attic door, shoving a heavy trunk over the trapdoor. The attic was dusty and cramped, filled with old boxes and creepy mannequins from the previous owner. There was a single small window at the gable end. We collapsed on the floor, gasping for air. "Did you kill it?" Ben asked. "I don't know," I said, reloading the gun with shaking hands. "I hit it, but these things are tanks." Below us, the house went silent again. No growls, no footsteps. It was the tactical silence. They were regrouping. Then we heard a sound that made no sense. It was the sound of a baby crying. It was coming from right outside the attic door. "Wah, wah." "It's mimicking a baby," I whispered, disgusted. "It thinks we'll open the door to save a baby." The cruelty of it made me sick. The crying turned into a laugh, a dry, rasping human laugh. "Sammy, come out and play," the voice crooned. It was using my mother's voice again. The mimicry stopped, replaced by the sound of heavy scraping on the roof shingles above our heads. "They're on the roof," Ben whispered, looking up at the exposed rafters. We heard the chimney rumble. A vivid nightmare of a wolf coming down the chimney flashed through my mind. I aimed the gun at the fireplace, but the sound moved. They were tearing at the shingles. They were digging through the roof. "Flares," I said, remembering the box in my pocket. "Animals hate fire." I handed Ben the flare gun I had grabbed from the safe. "If they break through the roof, shoot." The scratching got louder. A claw punched through the wood and insulation, debris raining down on us. Then another claw. A hole opened up, revealing the starry night sky and the silhouette of a pointed ear. Ben raised the flare gun. His hand was shaking so bad I thought he'd drop it. "Do it!" I yelled. Ben pulled the trigger. The flare hissed and shot upward, straight through the hole in the roof. It hit the creature right in the face. It howled and fell back. The red magnesium fire stuck to its fur. The creature rolled down the roof, screeching, lighting up the night like a demonic firework. The smell of burning hair filled the attic. But the flare had done something else. It had ignited the old dry insulation in the roof. Smoke began to fill the attic instantly. "We're gonna burn the house down," Ben coughed. "Better than being eaten," I choked out. The heat spread fast, licking at the rafters. The heat was becoming unbearable. We had a choice: burn to death or go back downstairs to face the pack. "We have to go down," I said. "Get the window open. We jump." It was a 2-story drop, but there was a bush below. It was our only chance. I smashed the attic window with the butt of the shotgun. Smoke billowed out into the cool night air. The roof above us was fully engulfed now, casting a bright orange glow over the yard. The creatures were down there. I could see them pacing in the firelight, waiting for us to drop. They knew we were flushed out. "They're waiting," Ben said, looking down. "We can't jump." "We have to distract them." I had 2 shotgun shells left. "I'll shoot at the one on the left. You jump right. Run for the woods. Don't stop." It was a suicide mission, but staying was certain death. I leaned out the window, took aim at the creature illuminated by the burning roof, and fired. It scattered. "Go!" I shoved Ben. He tumbled out the window, hitting the bush with a crash. I climbed onto the sill, the heat singing my eyebrows, and leapt. I hit the ground hard, rolling my ankle. Pain shot up my leg, but the adrenaline masked it. I scrambled up. Ben was already running toward the tree line. The house was a roaring inferno behind us, the heat intense. I limped after Ben. A howl rose up behind me. Close, too close. I turned and fired my last shell blindly into the smoke. I didn't wait to see if it hit. I ran into the dark embrace of the trees. We ran for what felt like hours. We didn't have a direction. We just put distance between us and the fire. The woods were thick and treacherous. Vines tripped us. Branches whipped our faces. But we didn't stop. We could hear them behind us, snapping twigs, heavy breathing. They were hurting us. But then the horizon began to gray. Dawn was breaking. The creatures slowed down. They didn't like the light. We stumbled onto a paved road just as the sun cleared the horizon. We were covered in soot, blood, and scratches. A trucker hauling logs slammed on his brakes when he saw us waving frantically. He leaned out of the cab, looking at us like we were ghosts. "What the hell happened to you boys?" he asked. "Bear," I lied, gasping for air. "Bear attack. House burned down." He let us in the cab and radioed the police. We sat in silence as the truck rumbled down the highway, putting miles between us and the farmhouse. I looked at Ben. He was staring out the window, hollow-eyed. We were safe. The police met us at a diner in the next town. We gave our statement. We blamed a bear and a faulty gas line for the fire. They seemed skeptical, but bought it. There was no evidence left. The fire would have destroyed everything: the journal, the safe, the DNA. A month has passed. I'm back in the city. The nightmares are bad, but being around people helps. I try to tell myself it's over. We survived. I hit 5,000 subscribers on my gaming channel just by posting a vague video about surviving a fire. People love a tragedy. But yesterday, Ben came over to my apartment. He looked sick, pale, sweating, shivering. He showed me the scratch on his arm, the one he got when we jumped out of the window. It wasn't healing. The skin around it had turned black and hard, like a callus. Hair was starting to grow out of the wound. Thick, dark, matted fur. He looked at me, and for a second his eyes flashed amber. "Sam," he whispered, his voice sounding weirdly distorted, like 2 voices speaking at once. "I'm so hungry." I froze. The journal. I remembered a page I hadn't read closely. "The bite changes you, but the scratch invites them in."
I looked at the window of my 4th-floor apartment. Outside, on the fire escape, there was a long, muddy handprint on the glass. They didn't stay in the woods. They followed us. And looking at Ben, I realized the siege wasn't over. It was just beginning. If you see a creature that looks like a wolf but stands like a man, do not run. And check your windows right now. If you see a handprint, it's already too late. Subscribe if you want to know what I did with Ben.